when you're going to look at adaptation for future or maybe slightly different things, one of the things that I've noticed when I'm in a facility is they'll go for lots of automation thinking it's going to cut down on labor, of course. And what they kind of forget is to look at the commissioning process. So they're saying, okay, we got this great piece of equipment. It's going to cut us out 20 FTEs. However, what they don't do a great job with, especially if they're getting equipment from Europe or China, which may
Okay.
or may not meet our regulations for sanitary design, and which may have some either suction cups or extra plastic or other pieces that are brittle and or may have harborage. I don't see as many rough welds anymore, right? Some of
Hmm.
those are getting better, at least on the initial machine. Now, once we start getting into older machine that we're trying to keep up with, that's a whole different question. But when we're talking about commissioning, can you talk to us a little bit about commissioning and or an adjustment to the previous purpose and what kinds of risks we need to be looking at and how we would best review that?
Yeah, I think that's really an important topic, and I see this a lot in the field where people purchase, very expensive piece of machinery, and just somehow their budget doesn't seem to include a lot of the installation costs. And like you said, the commissioning is a very big part of that cost. But even beyond that, sometimes it's the finishes that have to be provided on the floor, for example, and the mounting pads, perhaps. You're talking about, of course, the utility connections. And in many cases, when you have a piece of machinery that requires clean in place connections, you could have some very expensive stainless tubing coming in and out of that machine. And depending on where your CIP skid sits in your plant, we're talking a very significant amount of money to get that connected. And oftentimes it's just not thought of. And in fact, I see it, it's really probably one of the most unfortunate and difficult parts of my job is that I see that many people don't really consider, they're going to put a CIP machine in, but they don't really consider plumbing in and out of that machine and how it happens. And it's sometimes it's extremely difficult to get the cleaning solutions supplied and returned it's in an easy manner. And like I said, to install it, just a foot of 2-inch stainless tubing is going to be in the order of $500. So it's very, very high cost quickly. And when you have lots of valves, that just goes up exponentially, it seems like.
Exactly. And I see that for smaller sites that they don't have the expertise. They also are not looking at utilities and drainage. If can it take that flow, right? Can it take that flow in that short amount of time? We don't always see that. We don't always see where many regulations require that they treat their wastewater, at least for a pH, before it goes back into the municipal waters, or if there's any solids and things like that that they need to look at. So there's, I think, beyond just the equipment itself, like you're saying, there's lots of other things to talk about because, for instance, on your footing, we regularly see where those footings are not well sealed, and then you have some harborage, and you can see where the water goes in and out on occasion, especially after they're doing the floors. The foam may not get in there and under really well. On top of that, we also can see that the valves, like you said, they're not always set up correctly. There's just a lot of things going into those types of considerations that I think people don't take in the whole picture.
Yes, for sure. One thing that is really exciting is that the GFSI now, I've been told this, I haven't verified it, but now they are asking companies to provide purchase orders that include cleanability in the purchase order for new equipment.
So
Great stuff.
BRCGS has that specifically as a part of their thing, and then so in I believe it's 3.6. I'm sorry, take that back. 4.6 and 4.7. So 4.6 is equipment and commissioning, and 4.7 in BRC is maintenance. And then generally in the manufacturing side, it should be 11.2.1 is maintenance and 11.1.7 is equipment. And they do talk about purchasing specifications, things like that. The problem I see with that is you can have a piece of equipment that is correct for the process without it becoming correct for the infrastructure, the build, the process within a specific site. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So what I recommend is every piece of equipment, the company purchases every significant piece that has to be clean, right? It should have a request for a proposal. It should be lined up with a specification, how it's connected to other equipment, like you said, how it's connected to the utilities, including CIP, and how it sits in the plant with the level of the situation, all the access space.
Slopes.
That should be built
Okay.
into the purchase agreement. And so I know they're taking a step in the right direction and are starting to look at more trying to push this as a purchasing decision. And I think that's the way to get it done, really.